You probably know the scenario. The exam is in a couple of days, and you're surrounded by a stack of textbooks and scribbled notebooks, methodically rereading your notes, hoping that something will stay in your head. Sound familiar? Now the bad news. This method is almost useless. Why is rereading a trap? It seems logical. The more times you read the material, the better you'll remember it. But it actually creates the illusion of knowledge. You're not learning. You're just getting better at recognizing information, but not at remembering it. Studies by cognitive psychologists, such as Henry Roediger of the University of Washington, show that simply rereading produces extremely poor results compared to other methods of memorization. The brain doesn't strain, doesn't make new connections. It just glides over familiar words, creating a false sense that you've got it all figured out. Imagine watching a movie for the second time. You recognize the scenes, you anticipate the characters' lines, but would you be able to retell the movie in detail afterwards? Probably not. Rereading works the same way. The information seems familiar, but you can't reproduce it without a cheat sheet. How do you study then? Use the active recall method. If you want to really memorize material, you need to put your brain to work. Instead of just absorbing text, try active recall, a technique that forces you to recall information without prompting. How to apply? Close your textbook and try to write down the main thoughts you memorized. Open it again and compare it to your notes. What did you miss? Where did you make mistakes? Try explaining the topic out loud, as if you were telling a friend or at least a wall. Use question cards, like Quizlet or Anki, to test yourself. Write questions to yourself about the reading material and answer them a day later. Why it works? The brain is designed in such a way that information is remembered better if you actively retrieve it from memory. It's like a workout for your muscles. The more often you exercise them, the stronger they get. Studies show that students who use the active recall method memorize 50–80% more information compared to those who simply reread textbooks. Example. Let's say you need to learn a topic in biology. For example, the structure of the cell. Instead of just reading the chapter over and over, do this. Read the material once, highlighting the key points. 2. Close the textbook and draw a cell from memory, signing the organoids. 3. Check yourself. What parts did you forget? 4. Try to explain to someone, or even an imaginary friend, what each part of the cell does. 5. A day later, repeat the exercise, but now start by trying to remember everything without prompts. You'll end up remembering this information not just for tomorrow, but for years to come. Conclusion: stop wasting time on pointless rereading. If you want to learn faster and more efficiently, make your brain work. Tense it up, make it remember, explain, and answer questions. Not only will this speed up the process, but it will save you from having to relearn the material before every exam. So let's agree, no more sitting sessions with a textbook. Just running your eyes over the text. Study smart, not long. The Feynman method: explain as if you were 5 years old. Have you ever noticed that you can easily understand a complex topic when someone explains it in simple language? For example, if a professor says, "Gravity is the curvature of space-time due to the mass of an object," it sounds like scientific gibberish. But if someone says to you, "Imagine that space is a stretched sheet, and if you put a heavy ball on it, it will bend. That's how gravity works." It gets easier. This is the Feynman method. One of the best ways to not just memorize material, but to actually understand it. Why it works. When you explain something in simple words, your brain stops relying on memorizing arcane wording and starts looking for meaning. This forces you to break down complex ideas into understandable chunks and find connections between them. This method is named after physicist Richard Feynman, who could explain even quantum mechanics in a way that ordinary people could understand. His principle was simple. If you can't explain something simply, then you haven't understood it. Interval repetition. Forget about late-night marathons before an exam. Have you ever studied all night before an exam, and then the next day you completely forgot everything, as if your brain had specially formatted your memory? If so, congratulations. You've fallen into the last-minute cramming trap. The problem isn't you, it's the way your brain works. If you don't repeat material at certain intervals, it just disappears. Scientists call this the forgetting curve, and it can be fooled. Why do you forget information? In 1885, German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus conducted a study and derived the forgetting curve. It shows that in 1 hour you forget 50% of information, 24 hours you forget 70%, a week you're left with only 10 to 20% of what you've learned. That is, If you learned something today but did not repeat it tomorrow, consider that you learned it for nothing. But the good news is that if you repeat information at the right moments, you can memorize it for a long time without cramming. How does the interval repetition method work? The essence of the method. Repeat the material at regular intervals to refresh your memory and strengthen neural connections. Optimal repetition schedule. The first repetition is immediately after studying, 5 to 10 minutes. Second repetition, every other day. Third repetition, after 3 days. Fourth repetition, after a week. Fifth repetition, after a month, if it's something you need for a long time. This method unloads your brain. Instead of learning all the material before the exam, you just refresh it in small portions. How to apply interval repetition. Method 1. Use cards. Make cards with questions and answers. Sort them. If you know the answer, put it away. If you don't, repeat more often. The cards automatically remind you that it's time to repeat the material. Method 2. Rewrite the main ideas. A day after studying, try writing down everything you remember without prompts. Then, compare it to the textbook. Do it again a few days later. You'll see that a lot of things come to mind faster. Method 3. Use the pick 3 things technique. After each lecture or chapter, write down your top 3 takeaways. After a week, try to recall them without prompts. Method 4. Explain out loud. Remember Feynman's method. Explain the topic in your own words after a day, 3 days, a week. 50 to 10. Forget multi-hour sessions. Study in short bursts. Have you ever sat over your textbooks for 4 to 5 hours straight and then realized that you didn't really remember anything? Or worse, started out motivated, but 20 minutes later, you were already flipping through TikTok or YouTube. Here's the problem. The human brain isn't built for prolonged concentration. Studies show that after 50 minutes of intense focus, productivity drops dramatically. Instead of learning more efficiently, you just get tired, and the information stops being absorbed. Why can't the brain concentrate for longer than 50 minutes? Imagine your brain is a battery. At the beginning of studying, it is charged. But as you work, its energy is used up. After an hour of intense studying, your concentration drops and your brain starts to run on autopilot. This is what happens when you study without breaks. First 20-30 minutes. High concentration brain is actively memorizing. 40-50 minutes, fatigue, concentration drops, memorization deteriorates. After 60 minutes, your brain is overloaded and you're either procrastinating or staring stupidly at the text without comprehension. How does the 50-10 method work? 50 minutes of intense study, 10 minutes of active rest, repeat 3 to 4 times in a row, then take a long break for 30 minutes. It's simple but super effective. What to do in those 50 minutes? Turn off notifications, shut down social media. Focus on one task. Don't try to do everything at once. Use a timer. What to do during the 10-minute break? Get up, stretch, take a walk, drink water, take a couple deep breaths. Listen to music, but don't get stuck on your phone. Rule of thumb, don't waste this break on social media. If you open up TikTok or Instagram, your brain will switch, and it will be hard to get back into work mode. What method are you going to try?